having really horrible fights with my partner. And I had no idea why, because normally I'm even keeled, I'm conflict averse. And then all of a sudden I would just blow up anytime that I had extra energy. And the flip side of PMDD is I have 2 weeks where I'm full of energy and I'm like, I'm superhuman. I can work out twice a day. I can work 12-hour days, 14-hour days. On the one hand, sometimes I think about it like, oh my gosh, if I could work 14 to 16-hour days all day, every day for the whole month, look at where I'd be. I'd rule the world. I've been in a situation. I was at a writer's conference in an elevator full of men, and they noticed, oh, you're a speaker here, you're a writer. What did you write about? And I just said, well, PMDD. What is that? It's a menstrual health disorder. And I explained what it is and right before your period. The entire elevator goes quiet. Not many people know about PMDD. I still go to health providers, and there's about a 50% chance if I say I've got PMDD, somebody will say, what is that? You're making it up. And so it's just not well known. And if you actually think about where we are in terms of women's health, PMDD is one of a slate of many different things. We don't talk about periods because it's stigmatized. And it's hard when something is cyclical to necessarily keep that data, to recognize when is this happening. I started a newsletter to just interview researchers and ask, can you translate your paper into something that I can understand and that lay people can understand? I would just encourage people to analyze where they're getting their information from. If you're hearing about PMDD from social media, do more research, figure out what are they quoting, do your own Googling and see, read something from a medical website. In many ways, I think the diagnosis has helped me make peace with myself. That's helped me fight for raises in ways that I don't think I would normally just be like, you know what, it's okay to get paid peanuts. And I think you have to get really good at it and at relationship repair, because if you want to have friends or relationships and you're having meltdowns like this, you're not going to have them unless you figure out some way to compensate. The inhaler, the doctor was like, yeah, no problem. Sure, have all the inhalers you want. SSRIs, it was like the Spanish Inquisition. Like, you want what?
I am the founder of the PMDD Project, which is the UK's first and currently only charity to support people impacted by PMDD.
I'm so sorry to hear that you're also struggling with PMDD. I know how debilitating from personal experience PMDD can be, so it's tremendously courageous of you to take action and to found this amazing charity like you did.
Everyone experiences PMDD differently, but I was experiencing, and this is quite common as well, the suicidal ideation, which is the extreme version of PMDD. I think the biggest misconception probably is that PMDD is just bad PMS, so bad premenstrual syndrome. I think people, and honestly some healthcare professionals as well, still think it's just moodiness, it's just that time of the month, it's just an overreaction, rather than it actually being a hormone-related chronic disorder that can be completely debilitating and can actually be classed as a disability. But because it's not a priority within medical education, and because it's not part of the curriculum in medical school, that really causes a lot of friction, and it's massively under-researched. It's more often than not misdiagnosed. I think there's just a lack of urgency to it, despite the fact that it impacts roughly 1 in 20 individuals. Well, the first thing I would do, I think, is make PMDD recognised and training mandatory across the healthcare system, I suppose, starting with GPs and frontline clinical education. When month in, month out, people are experiencing suicidal ideation, we don't have time to wait. I think recognition is the first step in making change. And once it's seen as important at a policy level, support structures can follow across every part of society. Bringing people together and allowing them to tap into their inner creativity. For me personally, and for many people within the PMDD community, being able to express my creativity and maybe tap into what makes me feel safe and comfortable and calm, whether that be yoga, Pilates, art, spoken poetry. Yeah, I'd say what surprised me most is probably how many people are still reaching out saying, oh wait, that's what I've got. I dread to think how many people are out there living with this condition in the dark, experiencing this month in, month out, and it can be 2 weeks of the month that they're experiencing this and not knowing what it is, so therefore not getting the help that they deserve. I think people who have felt alone for years of finding words for their experience and realizing that they're not broken, that it's not their fault. Those moments were everything. I think they remind me that even if big changes take a while, we're already making a real difference in people's lives right now. It definitely depends on any external factors, I think, because I have a full-time job alongside this as well, and life can life sometimes. And I think some things can get in the way, and that can definitely intensify my symptoms. I've learned to be kind to myself, slow with myself, and just knowing when to say no to things. And yeah, I think definitely the creativity as well. Just give myself time to read or do things that make me happy. And yeah, there's so many different ways that if I'm feeling a bit lost and a bit rubbish, I just know that I've got a list of things that I really enjoy doing and that make me happy and center me back to who I am and what I'm here for. And there's a lot of shame with PMDD, which there shouldn't be, but there is. But then when you're out of the luteal phase, a lot of people feel that they don't recognize those feelings and those thoughts that they were experiencing during the luteal phase. And I think just connecting with the PMDD community as well, reaching out to us if anyone needs a conversation, we're always happy to help with the narrative of how to have those kind of conversations. Definitely, I think PMDD is a worldwide condition. It's a global condition that impacts millions and millions of people. And we are funded solely by supporters and donations. So if people are able to support by fundraising or donating to the PMDD project, it would be massively appreciated. And always just giving us continuous feedback as well.
I'm Claire Knox, and I'm the founder of See Her Thrive, and we are a company committed to making sure women's health is recognised, valued, supported in every workplace. Being at work is probably the last thing that lots of us wanted to do in those moments, and that masking and that presenteeism was often the catalyst for burnout and longer periods of absence. And it makes sense, doesn't it, when you push through and you're going against what your body needs and what it's telling you to do, at some point the wheels come off. It's hard enough to live with PMDD, let alone be in a work environment where you don't get the support you need. And more than that, you're actually treated appallingly. But I don't think we should let it go, because if we let it continue, then other people are going to be on the receiving end and the whole cycle will perpetuate. We know that with PMDD, it can affect performance at work. It can affect things like needing to take time off. So sickness absence might crop up for people. And so if it is starting to have an impact on your work performance, then it's definitely better to be proactive and to have a conversation about it rather than get into any kind of disciplinary situation. Or some companies have this trigger-based absence management system, and then you end up having an awful meeting with HR and you're forced into making a disclosure. We also can be guilty of putting barriers up and our own stereotypes of what we think a male manager, how he's going to respond, without giving him the opportunity. And actually, a lot of male managers I've worked with and delivered training to are incredibly supportive. They're so supportive and they're desperate to know what they can do to help. My body's different, my brain's different, and that's okay. I have a different productivity pattern to most people, but I'm still a really valuable, high-performing member of the team.
Yeah, and also communication, right? Like, I don't think at the moment it's really accepted to go to work and say, look, I'm in my luteal phase right now, so if you could just not piss me off, that would be great.
There are times when we're all struggling. That's the nature of being human. And yet we still have these ideas about work and what's professional and how we need to show up every single day. And we live in this high performance culture, which I totally do. And it's how do we marry that with being human and all of the stuff we deal with and we go through at the same time? Whereas, unfortunately, a lot of this work and these initiatives are driven bottom up, often by women with lived experience who are having a difficult time. And it makes me sad that's the case. And we do need to see more leadership teams getting behind this and really driving it from the top. We need to model the behaviour we want to see in our organisations. In an ideal world, I would have 3 days off before my period. Say off. It's very interesting. And I used to do this. I would say to myself, right, you're not going to do anything today. And the minute you take that pressure off, actually, I would find myself tinkering away with things. Over time, PMDD can just engulf you and it can become your identity. And I think that's one of the cruel things about the disorder, is it has that ability to just take over completely and you become the condition. And I see that in the workplace because people lose confidence in themselves. I'm letting everyone in my team work when they want, how they want, in whatever way works for them. And one of the reasons he cited was to manage menstrual health, enabling people to work with their body, not against it. It's going to be better for everyone. We've had this huge menopause movement, which has opened up the menstrual health conversation. We just need to keep going. And especially in the face of everything that's happening politically and the difficulties we're seeing with ED&I and things like that, we need to just keep going and keep talking about it. And yeah, we'll get there.
In my direct practice, that when people come to me, I work very holistically for people that resonates with. And by that, I mean I will combine lots of different talking therapies. I will work somatically with the body. I'm also a yoga and meditation teacher, so I work very much in body-based movement, and I've done lots of somatic trainings, and I work with clinical hypnosis. I work with eye movement desensitization reprocessing for trauma, and my specialist area is really trauma and neurodiversity, but underpinning everything that I work with is really regulation of the nervous system and working with people and looking at whether they're overactive or underactive in the way that their nervous system is presenting to the world. It's such intense symptoms that often the nervous system will shut down and be quite detached from some of the symptoms because it's become a person's norm. And it's only when we start to talk about it that they realize how much it's impacting them beyond which they thought it was impacting them. There can be intense rage that's present, which can often come from that fight or flight. And then there can be cycles of shame that come from that, which then can lead to the nervous system shutting down. So then I will then open up to the other approaches that I might do. So beyond what we've spoken about in terms of, there could be yoga, there could be meditation, there could be the nutrition and the Ayurvedic approaches. I also do energy healing, which is obviously not in my clinical psychology training. That's beyond that. I'm of a view that for anything to work, it has to have trust and it has to have buy-in. When I've worked as an expert witness, I've been challenged by barristers when I've been in court giving evidence saying, oh, don't you do all this strange stuff like energy healing? But I felt that I can back that up because I will obviously be saying, actually, I work in an evidence-based way. And when people are stuck, then we actually bring other things on board in order to actually help somebody move forward. I think as women, we're often taught you have periods, that's just something you've got to deal with, and it's really minimized. And I don't think the cognitive impact of these things is really considered very deeply either. I think they need to be working in a trauma-informed way because it's not just the PMDD, it's the shame that brings. So it can be extremely low moods for somebody, there can be suicidal thoughts for somebody. And then what will happen is they'll have these intense feelings. And then, as I say, the period will come, they'll start to dismiss it and then they forget about it. And then it's never really put on record. If someone has had trauma in their system, if we're thinking of it energetically, we can think that it holds in our energy systems and it holds in the chakras, which are our energy wheels. The difficulty in the body will be there'll be a lot more inflammation, there'll be a lot more stress and contraction because the body is already in fight or flight. So actually having reactions where a woman feels she's not herself is extremely scary, because sometimes I've worked with women that can be very aggressive, for example, with partners, and that's not who they are at their very core. It can be very much about a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose for someone, which a lot more people can perhaps anchor and ground themselves into and wouldn't necessarily label that as a spiritual aspect. So, for example, I have ADHD. So if I'm working with someone with ADHD and PMDD, often there can be a lot of emotional dysregulation outside of the PMDD point of the month. And it can be difficult for people to be consistent in some of the strategies that they might be using. If we're talking about ADHD specifically, the way somebody with ADHD processes dopamine is different. So there isn't enough that's held in the system. And if we have spikes and drops of estrogen, which we have during our period, that can then cause less dopamine. And I've had women that have had that so severe that they've had to work from home or have time at home because they then can't wear any clothing during that time, because the sensory difficulties that are a part of the ADHD and the neurodivergence becomes even more intense during that luteal phase when the PMDD is coming in. You can have that huge spike of feeling really suicidal and then that goes. So then someone will say, oh, it couldn't have been that bad. I don't need to see anyone about that. PMD takes away a sense of autonomy with your own body because this thing takes over you.
Really overcome with fatigue, unable to get out of bed. She'd have some dark thoughts and some hopelessness. And she would blame herself. There's a secondary impact of, feelings of worthlessness. The rules of the world kept changing over and over again. I felt like Neo in the Matrix, understanding the Matrix. That's how I describe it, because everything started to come together and I could see things the way things are. Because when we were tracking, it was just so like clockwork. I mean, just to say as well, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a counselor, I've written a book. It's from the experience that I've had, but also, drawing on the experience of hundreds of different partners that I've come into contact with. If I was to try and recreate what it would be like for me to have PMDD, and I give this analogy of that I'm on a flight to a funeral. It's a really stressful situation. I lose my job. When we land, I've lost my car keys and everything like that. And then I drop my sandwich, at the end. It's all the build-up. It's all the kind of really, really, awful situation that has a massive effect. I haven't eaten, I haven't slept, I'm in a stressful environment, and then I drop the sandwich and it just all falls apart. I think we occupy a special place in the brain. And I think it may be that because we already have that emotional vulnerability or intimacy with someone, it's almost like a compliment in some ways that we're trusted and loved. So we see the raw aspects of this more than other people. I really see that there is an amazing amount of masking that has to go on with PMDD, and those who have PMDD have had to put on that happy face for so many different situations, but it's only sustainable for a little bit before the whole physiological burden just becomes overwhelming. From an outsider's perspective, watching PMDD as almost like a spectator, I don't think many people realize how marked that change is. Actually, my belief is that the most progress happens in the follicular phase, where people are able to talk one with another, where they're able to kind of in a better space to plan for things and to really make some palpable differences to their lives in anticipation. Those organic discussions, those one-to-ones where you're both talking in a reflective way, are the real sources of healing in the PMDD relationship, where both have that safety to talk about it. I really do try to promote doing that, but it's difficult, isn't it? I just dealt with this in a true kind of man thing, which was kind of like, right, I'm just going to do this. My kids were a source of additional work and stress, but they were also very special to me. There's nothing quite like the unconditional love of a child. And what's amazing is everyone thinks that their experience is unique, and it is unique. But there is so much commonality, so much crossover, and so much similarity. But what was really nice about the results of the study is that both partners and those who have PMDD, on the aspects of love and commitment, remained absolutely unaffected by PMDD. It was consistent with the control groups who didn't have PMDD. Love and commitment just remained there. PMDD can be extreme enough to cause people to self-harm, and 34% of those with PMDD will attempt suicide. Abuse is something that we need to talk about more in the community. I speculate that it's bilateral, that those who have PMDD are more likely to be abused as well. But again, we don't know. Abuse is abuse. If someone's experiencing abuse, they need to take appropriate action. And it always polarizes into that, doesn't it? It's like, oh, just get out of there. It's abuse, It's really difficult because there is that degree of subjectivity. I think that anyone who feels that their safety is compromised or that their world is narrowing in, then they need to get some help. If we have a broken arm, we're straight to accident and emergency. We're straight to the hospital. But mental health is different, and it shouldn't be. And also, I think, is the more I understood about PMDD, the more it increased the compassion. I guess sometimes it takes some sort of opposition to help firm up who you are. And I think PMDD helped do that for both of us, help really solidify who we are. They would do this ritual, and I can't remember what it was. It was something like they have to touch each other's noses at the same time or something like that. And I just thought this was hilarious, but actually just a really nice thing to do. When you're in the sea, losing direction, or it's dark, you've got a fixed point to really point to and say, right, these are some truths that I know are the foundation of my relationship.
My name's Amy. I am the CEO and co-founder of Moody, which is a hormone health app that improves your mental health, understanding essentially how your hormones are impacting on your mental health, and then being able to provide personalization around diet, exercise, mindfulness, but all designed for the female body and based on the science of how your hormones actually impact on the fundamentals of your well-being. So it's really giving you the tools to see the world through the lens of your own body, your own chemistry, and just retraining women to think about their hormones as a component factor in your decision making, in your mental health, and hopefully allow women to be more empowered in their everyday. The problem was that I didn't really understand that you can't just go. So like many women, I burn out. It doesn't matter how much women are told that they need to do everything and have everything. If we don't understand the fundamentals of the way our brain and body works, you're setting yourself up for failure. And the fact that we're still a world first in mental health and hormones says everything about the way the world perceives both mental health and women. What we're not trying to do is give someone a PhD, right? What we're trying to do is just help you understand you better. We're just giving them existing research that's been synthesized into a very simple deployment mechanic where you can use it to be able to say, okay, well, this is the day in which this is relevant for me. You can't put generative AI front facing to any person without having the risk of something being said that's not true. But then those insights are reviewed by a doctor or a clinician across both psychiatry and endocrinology, so brain and body. The reason that's important is that it means it's generating it for you at exactly the moment you need it to give you the context, but it's not generated with any risk of hallucination, right? And also qualifying the safety of the data in this space, which ultimately is going to be dangerous in the future. It's because if you know that your manic episodes are directly linked to the week before your bleeds, that is a signifier that this is PMDD. So misdiagnosis of PMDD often gets categorized as either depression or bipolar. The difference with those is the fact that this is directly linked to the drop in estrogen and rise in progesterone and the effect on your brain. I think some of the most moving stories that we've had women say, this saved my life. Like I was suicidal, and this was something that allowed me to have the power to go and explain to my doctor where this information was triggering me and when it was happening. I think the biggest power we all have is to be able to advocate for ourselves. The best evaluation tools you have are your own body, right? The problem being that, people often say, oh, that's a great vision, but mental health is a nice to have, not something that is a foundational part of your life, which blows my mind to this day that that's even a question. It's just no one's given anyone access to the information. So I think that there's a big shift happening. It just needs to happen faster, to be honest. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to build this as a subscription product for women, because there isn't the funding out there to fund these projects. It's just that thing where women are supposed to do all the things. And I'm like, that's not setting women up for success. It's not physically possible. But when you have the right energy and the right momentum, you can do a lot.
Evelyn is a women's health business. We specialize in premenstrual health, targeting PMS and PMDD. Our goal is to raise awareness, to validate, to educate, but also to develop support networks and treatment solutions for those that experience those conditions and those around them as well. I knew that I wanted to do something significant, something that I felt was changing lives of millions. I'm keenly aware of the gender health gap, and I kind of feel, do I feel angry or worried or frustrated? I probably feel all of them about the world that she's growing up in. Also the conversations post-diagnosis stayed with me, where she was very close to being gaslit into having a hysterectomy at the age of 23. So bringing all that together, I think the kind of dad in me wanted to work in women's health, but also an area where I felt personally connected to. But the entrepreneur in me wanted to make sure that it was a big idea with legs. 4 out of 5 women experience a premenstrual health condition, PMS and PMDD. And in its most severe form, it's estimated that 3 to 8%, around about 5%, 1 in 20 women experience PMDD. These are debilitating conditions. These are conditions that can result in people quite literally taking their life. There's not enough research. A lot of the research that we're relying on, simply because this is women's health and it's not funded as it needs to be, more work is needed. And with PMDD and severe PMS in particular, receiving that diagnosis, which some people are waiting for 15, 20% of their life to receive, that moment can be euphoric. The name, so Evelyn is my mother's middle name and my daughter's middle name. And so for me, the business itself is a vehicle for changing the world and ensuring that some of the things that my mum would have faced, my daughter doesn't have to. But what we're working on at Evelyn and other businesses are working on in the premenstrual health space is critically urgent. There's such a significant gap when it comes to premenstrual health. I don't really buy into this toxic form of masculinity, which basically defines itself in some kind of antithesis to women. I'm strong because I make you feel weak. Gain my sense of identity by putting you down. That's not strong. Strong is being a partner.
At this point, I genuinely just thought like this was normal behavior, which obviously isn't the case. It really sucks that women have to prepare to advocate for themselves during a doctor's appointment, because like, why should you have to do that for any case?
I think the worst advice you could give someone who's having PMDD symptoms is don't overthink things, that it's not such a big deal, just get over it.
For example, I remember the one time when I decided to go back to therapy or something like that. This was pre-diagnosis as well. I remember the phrase my mum said, which was, oh, I thought the depression would have gone away by now. Going outside, whether it's sunny or not, I feel like is always like just a good antidote to whatever you've got going on in your life, whether that's PMDD or something else entirely. But then my PMDD definitely makes that a whole lot worse. So if I'm just faced with a challenge and I'm at a crossroads, I'm just like, Rob, who's my boyfriend, I need you to decide, because literally my capacity is not there. But then I get frustrated at myself because I can't make that decision.
It's like, oh, we need something. I'll just order it online and I'll just pay way too much for it because I just don't want to deal with the researching and the comparing and the like figuring it all out kind of thing.
I did a massive order the other week and I've now looked at it and I'm just like, I don't need any of the stuff that I've bought. And I'm not actually sure on it anyway. I just remember the response to being how I was so emotional was to have a child. And I'm just like, respectfully, no.
One funny bit of advice that I wasn't offended by, but that was pretty extreme, was like, okay, why don't you just stay pregnant for the rest of your menstruating life?
Like, it's wild, because if it was a male experienced medical issue, would they be saying that to them? Like, no. But yeah, just don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, stand up for yourself. When a flower is struggling, you don't blame the flower, you fix the environment. And I think, yeah, I'd love to have more conversations as well around PMDD. And I think if anyone else is maybe thinking that they might have it or wants to know more, let's have that conversation, because that's also only going to help the awareness of the condition and further the progress that we can make as well.